Have you ever felt a pull towards something you know isn't good for you? Something destructive, yet irresistible. A craving that whispers louder each time you ignore it? What if that irresistible urge isn't random? What if there's a deeper, hidden force operating beneath your conscious awareness? A force Carl Jung called the shadow self. This hidden aspect of your psyche doesn't just drive your impulses. It fuels your addictive behaviors, pulling you toward destructive choices in ways that logic alone can't explain. But to understand how addiction really works, you have to go beneath the surface. You have to meet the shadow self face to face. Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, discovered a fundamental truth. Human beings aren't driven only by logic or conscious desires. Beneath our carefully constructed identities, there's a hidden dimension, a darker, mysterious aspect of our psyche that Jung named the shadow. Your shadow self contains everything you've ever rejected, denied, or hidden away. Your forbidden desires, your painful memories, your suppressed anger, shame, jealousy, lust, and fear. These traits don't disappear. They're simply pushed into the unconscious, waiting silently, influencing your choices in ways you can't even see. Imagine your mind as an iceberg. Your conscious awareness is just the tip, visible above water. But beneath the surface lies the enormous, unseen shadow, deep, dark, powerful, and capable of steering your life from below, especially when ignored. Jung believed the shadow self isn't inherently evil. It's just raw, untamed, and primal. It includes not only negative qualities, but also positive aspects you've repressed. Creativity, assertiveness, confidence, sensuality. Anything that was once considered inappropriate or unacceptable by family, society, or culture. Think of your shadow as a locked room in your psyche. Within this room, you've hidden away everything you don't want others, or even yourself, to see. Yet, behind that locked door, those hidden aspects begin to grow restless. Over time, they start to knock. If you don't answer willingly, they find another way out, often through addiction, compulsive behavior, or emotional chaos. Have you ever met someone who outwardly appears kind, calm, and collected, but behind closed doors explodes in fits of rage or engages in risky, addictive behaviors? That's the shadow at work. Perhaps you know someone who projects an image of moral purity, yet secretly struggles with substance abuse or compulsive habits. This contradiction arises when a person's shadow breaks free from unconscious repression and takes control of behavior in secret, destructive ways. Or maybe you've experienced it yourself. You set goals, make promises, strive for healthier living, but repeatedly sabotage your efforts. Overeating, substance use, gambling, or destructive relationships. You might wonder, why can't I stop? Because you're not just fighting a habit, you're wrestling with your own unconscious shadow, seeking recognition and release. Jung emphasized something important. The shadow isn't your enemy. It's an essential part of your psyche, crying out to be acknowledged and integrated. If ignored, the shadow fuels your impulses, sabotages your goals, and feeds addiction. But if recognized and integrated, it can become a powerful source of insight, creativity, strength, and transformation. Instead of pushing the shadow deeper into the unconscious, Jung urged people to engage with it directly, to shine the light of awareness onto the hidden corners of their psyche. Only then can healing begin. Understanding the shadow self matters deeply when dealing with addiction, because addiction isn't just a physical or chemical dependence. It's profoundly psychological and spiritual. Jung believed addiction wasn't about substances themselves. Rather, it's about trying to fill an inner emptiness caused by disconnected aspects of your psyche. Addiction is a misguided attempt by your unconscious to heal deep psychic wounds or fulfill repressed desires. In fact, Jung famously said to Bill Wilson, co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, "Spiritus contra spiritum," meaning spirit against spirits. Jung saw addiction as an unconscious craving for spiritual wholeness, manifesting destructively because the shadow wasn't being acknowledged. Your addictive impulses are therefore not random. They're signals from your shadow calling you home. Addiction is the shadow's cry to be recognized, understood, and integrated. When you ignore this call, addiction worsens. The unconscious demands attention, escalating compulsive behaviors until you're forced to confront yourself or suffer deeply. But what exactly happens when addiction meets the shadow? How does the shadow silently drive you toward destructive patterns, keeping you trapped in cycles of self-sabotage. To understand this fully, we have to dive even deeper, straight into the heart of the relationship between your shadow and addictive behavior. And that's exactly where we're headed next. Why do we repeatedly engage in addictive behaviors, knowing full well they lead to suffering, isolation, and pain? From a rational standpoint, addiction doesn't make sense. It's destructive, illogical, harmful. Yet the addictive urge can overpower reason, hijack intentions, and sabotage willpower. According to Carl Jung, the answer lies not in the logic of the conscious mind, but in the hidden depths of your unconscious shadow self. Jung saw clearly that addictive behaviors are rarely driven purely by chemical or physical dependency alone. More often, addiction masks deeper psychic wounds, unresolved trauma, suppressed pain, repressed emotions, all held captive in the unconscious. Your shadow self contains exactly these elements. When unacknowledged, they silently exert immense influence over your choices and actions, often steering you into patterns of addiction and self-sabotage. When you're triggered, stressed, lonely, or overwhelmed, your unconscious seeks relief. It pulls you toward substances, distractions, and addictive escapes, not because they heal, but because they numb or temporarily silence your hidden pain. Think of addiction as your shadow desperately reaching for comfort, recognition, or escape. It's not random, it's deeply meaningful, though often misunderstood. At the core of every addiction lies a fundamental impulse, seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. Jung understood that the shadow self holds many repressed desires and emotions. Pleasure-seeking behaviors, like drug use, compulsive shopping, gambling, or binge eating, are often driven by unconscious shadow impulses craving fulfillment. Equally, your shadow stores deep, unresolved pain, wounds from childhood, unmet emotional needs, repressed grief, hidden shame. When these emotional scars become activated, your shadow seeks immediate relief, pulling you towards addictive coping mechanisms to soothe inner turmoil temporarily. Yet temporary relief is fleeting. When the substance wears off or the distraction fades, you're left emptier than before, still disconnected from your authentic emotions, still unaware of what's truly driving your addictive behaviors. Let's look closely at how your shadow self shows up in specific addictions. Substance abuse. Many turn to drugs or alcohol to temporarily silence emotional pain or escape unresolved trauma. Jung described addiction as a misguided attempt to connect with deeper meaning, often mistaken for intoxication, when what your shadow really craves is integration and wholeness. Compulsive eating. Overeating often masks emotional hunger. The shadow, starved for attention or suppressed love, pushes you toward comfort foods to soothe emotional emptiness, rejection, or loneliness. Gambling addiction. Compulsive gambling taps into the shadow's need for excitement, risk, and power, often because these aspects of yourself have been suppressed in daily life. The shadow seeks thrills and sensations otherwise denied by a controlled, monotonous existence. Relationship addiction and codependency. Obsessive relationships and codependent behaviors often reflect unintegrated shadow needs for validation, love, or belonging. Your shadow, holding unresolved abandonment wounds, drives compulsive attempts to earn love from others, leading to repeated cycles of emotional suffering. In each case, addiction arises from deep shadow impulses, unseen, misunderstood, yet incredibly powerful. Until these hidden motivations are recognized and integrated, addictive patterns persist relentlessly. Carl Jung famously wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." In addiction, this becomes painfully clear. The unconscious shadow demands your attention through urges, cravings, self-destructive impulses. It whispers silently, guiding your decisions, overriding your conscious control, until you finally turn inward and acknowledge what's hidden beneath. Addictive urges aren't just destructive, they're symbolic. Each craving is a clue pointing towards a hidden need within your psyche. Alcohol or substances might symbolize emotional numbness or longing for spiritual transcendence. Food might symbolize emotional emptiness or unresolved childhood neglect. Compulsive relationships might symbolize unhealed abandonment wounds. If you pause and reflect instead of immediately numbing yourself, you start seeing addiction as meaningful rather than merely destructive. You begin recognizing your shadow's call for deeper awareness and healing. Here lies Jung's powerful insight. Addiction isn't overcome by force or willpower alone. It's transformed through conscious integration of the shadow. Integration involves shining light onto your hidden impulses, unresolved traumas, and emotional pain. It means turning toward addiction, not as something to fight against, but as something to understand deeply and compassionately. Imagine addiction as a messenger, carrying vital information from your shadow. What unresolved trauma does this addiction symbolize? What unmet emotional need is your shadow trying to fulfill? What hidden aspect of yourself is addiction temporarily soothing or numbing? By exploring these questions honestly, you transform addiction from an enemy into an ally, a gateway to self-awareness and healing. This requires courage, because facing your shadow means confronting uncomfortable truths, painful memories, suppressed emotions, deep fears. Yet Jung emphasized this bravery as essential for lasting recovery. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To heal addiction, you must consciously embrace your shadow, not eradicate it. Addiction weakens precisely when your unconscious motivations become conscious, when you listen compassionately instead of numbing mindlessly. Integration transforms addictive impulses into insights, cravings into clarity, destructive patterns into wisdom. Your shadow, once destructive, becomes deeply insightful, guiding your path toward wholeness, authenticity, and healing. Jung recognized addiction as one of the most profound opportunities for psychic integration. Beneath addictive behavior lies immense psychic energy, creativity, and strength, trapped and misunderstood. When addiction leads you inward, rather than further away from yourself, your shadow ceases sabotaging your life. It becomes your greatest source of personal power and profound inner transformation. But before this transformation can fully occur, you must truly understand the roots of your addiction, its origins in trauma, unmet emotional needs, and repressed shadow impulses. Where exactly do these roots begin? And how can you access and heal them once and for all? That's what we'll explore next, because to truly overcome addiction, you must journey deeply inward, right to the source. Addiction doesn't begin at the moment you first indulge in a substance or behavior. It begins much earlier, often in childhood, buried deep within emotional wounds, traumatic experiences, and suppressed feelings. Carl Jung knew that addiction isn't about pleasure, it's about pain. Not about craving something external, but longing for something internal. To truly understand addiction, you must journey back to where your shadow self was born, the hidden, painful past where your deepest wounds reside. Jung believed that the shadow begins forming early in life, through family dynamics, childhood experiences, and emotional trauma. As a child, you learned quickly what emotions were acceptable and which were not. Perhaps you were praised for being quiet, polite, and controlled, but scolded for expressing anger, fear, sadness, or excitement. Over time, you suppressed those forbidden emotions, pushing them into the unconscious. They became your shadow, quietly influencing your behavior from the depths. Imagine a child repeatedly criticized or neglected by caregivers. To survive emotionally, the child buries feelings of loneliness, shame, anger, or sadness. Later in life, these repressed emotions manifest as addictive behaviors, alcohol, substances, compulsive eating, as unconscious attempts to soothe or numb that early pain. The shadow's roots lie precisely here, in early emotional wounds, abandonment fears, suppressed anger, and unmet needs. Addiction becomes a misguided way to manage these unresolved emotional burdens. For many, the shadow is born not only from emotional suppression, but also from traumatic events, abuse, loss, abandonment, or severe emotional neglect. Trauma isn't just a painful event. It becomes a psychic wound stored within your unconscious. To cope, you detach from painful emotions, burying trauma in the depths of your psyche. But buried trauma doesn't disappear. It becomes fuel for your shadow, unconsciously steering addictive patterns as ways to escape unbearable emotional pain. For example, someone who experienced abandonment in childhood might unconsciously fear closeness or intimacy. To numb this deep-rooted fear, they may repeatedly sabotage relationships or rely on substances to soothe hidden anxiety. Jung emphasized that unresolved trauma must eventually surface, if not consciously through therapy and self-reflection, then destructively through addictive behaviors and emotional chaos. Another critical aspect Jung explored was emotional regulation, the ability to cope healthily with emotional pain and stress. If you didn't learn healthy emotional regulation as a child, perhaps because caregivers couldn't model or teach it, your shadow took over. Instead of processing emotions consciously, you repressed, avoided, or numbed them. As an adult, you might struggle to cope with life stresses, turning instead to addictive substances or behaviors to manage overwhelming emotions. Your shadow whispers quietly, "This will numb the pain. This will make you feel better. Or you don't have to face this." In reality, addiction provides only temporary relief, deepening the unconscious cycle of emotional avoidance. Without confronting and healing the shadow's emotional wounds, addiction remains a constant coping mechanism, destructive yet deeply compelling. This creates a powerful cycle. Emotional pain triggers your shadow's wounds. Your shadow drives addictive urges to numb or escape this pain. Addiction temporarily soothes emotional distress, reinforcing reliance on destructive coping. Pain remains unresolved, pushing you toward further addictive behavior. This cycle continues endlessly, reinforcing your shadow's control over your life, weakening self-awareness, and deepening feelings of shame, isolation, and helplessness. Carl Jung observed this clearly. Addiction isn't the disease itself. It's a symptom of deep emotional disconnection and unconscious suppression. If addiction is rooted in shadow suppression, then healing addiction requires exactly the opposite: shadow integration. Shadow integration involves consciously exploring, feeling, and expressing the painful emotions and experiences previously repressed into the unconscious. You identify childhood wounds and traumas clearly. You allow yourself to feel suppressed emotions safely, often through therapy or intentional journaling. You embrace vulnerability, learning to express emotional pain openly rather than numbing it. This isn't easy, but it's necessary. Jung said clearly, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." People will do anything to avoid facing their own soul. But only through courageous emotional honesty does addiction truly weaken. When your shadow's wounds become conscious, addiction loses its power. Your emotions become manageable, understandable, and integrable, rather than overwhelming and dangerous. One of Jung's profound insights was the importance of self-acceptance in overcoming addiction. Healing addiction isn't about eradicating the shadow, but accepting it deeply. It's about bringing compassion and kindness to your pain, your imperfections, your unmet needs, not judging or punishing them further. Your shadow isn't evil, it's wounded. Addiction isn't failure, it's survival. When you shift from self-condemnation to compassionate self-awareness, true healing begins. Self-acceptance allows your shadow to come home, to be integrated consciously, lovingly, and safely. When you address your shadow consciously, addiction stops being destructive and starts being transformative. It becomes an opportunity for profound self-awareness, healing, and spiritual growth. Your deepest wounds become sources of emotional wisdom. Painful experiences become pathways to empathy and connection. Addiction itself becomes your greatest teacher, illuminating exactly where your psyche needs attention and healing. Through shadow integration, addiction transforms from destructive symptom into powerful catalyst for self-understanding, resilience, and profound inner healing. Carl Jung taught clearly, addiction doesn't need to be permanent, but true healing requires going inward, facing emotional wounds, reclaiming suppressed aspects, integrating your shadow's truths. This inner journey isn't easy. It demands courage, vulnerability, and radical honesty. Yet it also promises liberation, not from your shadow, but alongside it. But how exactly do you embark on this inner journey practically? What specific methods, tools, and strategies did Jung recommend to safely face your shadow, heal your addiction, and achieve lasting transformation? That's precisely where we go next, because confronting your shadow directly isn't only possible, it's life-changing. And the first step begins now. Carl Jung didn't just diagnose the problem. He provided powerful tools and practical methods to face your shadow directly and heal the underlying roots of addiction. Integrating your shadow isn't theoretical. It's practical, grounded, and deeply transformative. It requires commitment, vulnerability, and courage, but it offers freedom, self-awareness, and lasting healing in return. Here's how Jung recommended you practically engage and integrate your shadow. Step 1. Radical self-awareness and introspection. Healing begins with self-awareness. Start by recognizing and acknowledging your addictive behaviors honestly, without judgment or denial. Jung emphasized clearly, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Keep an honest journal to track emotional triggers, addictive urges, and patterns. Reflect deeply on these behaviors, asking, oh, what unmet emotional need is this behavior attempting to fulfill? Oh, what pain, fear, or trauma am I avoiding through addiction? Oh, what emotions or experiences am I repeatedly suppressing? Through this radical self-honesty, your shadow's hidden motivations become conscious, weakening addiction's power significantly. Step 2. Therapeutic shadow work. Shadow integration often requires guided exploration. Jung highly recommended therapeutic support, particularly depth-oriented or Jungian psychotherapy, to safely navigate shadow material. In therapy, you can safely explore suppressed childhood wounds or trauma. Process painful emotions consciously rather than numbing them through addiction. Learn healthy emotional regulation and self-expression. Identify and integrate positive shadow aspects like confidence, creativity, and assertiveness you've suppressed out of fear or shame. Therapy provides safe space, professional guidance, and supportive accountability, essential tools for deeply effective shadow integration and healing addictive behavior. Step 3. Active imagination and shadow dialogue. Jung's powerful technique of active imagination offers a direct path to shadow integration. Sit quietly, close your eyes, and bring forward an image of your shadow self or addictive behavior as vividly as possible. Engage this image in conversation. Ask questions openly and curiously. Oh, what are you trying to show me? Oh, why are you in pain? Oh, what emotional need are you fulfilling through addiction? Listen compassionately without judgment. Allow spontaneous responses to surface naturally. Through this dialogue, your unconscious shadow speaks directly, revealing emotional truths, hidden wounds, and deeper insights behind addictive impulses. You transform addiction from unconscious compulsion into conscious understanding. Step 4. Mindfulness and presence in daily life. Mindfulness practice is another key tool Jung would recommend for integrating your shadow and healing addiction. Practice daily meditation or mindfulness, observing addictive urges without reacting. Notice emotions, cravings, and triggers with compassionate curiosity. Rather than immediately numbing emotions, consciously breathe, observe, and allow emotions to pass through naturally. Over time, mindfulness weakens addictive compulsions dramatically. You regain emotional balance and self-regulation, gradually replacing destructive behaviors with conscious, intentional living. Step 5. Symbolic expression and creativity. Creativity and symbolic expression are crucial tools in Jungian shadow work and healing addiction. Engage your shadow creatively through drawing, painting, writing, dance, poetry, or music. Allow unconscious emotions, impulses, and wounds to be expressed symbolically, without censorship. Creative expression gives your shadow a safe outlet, allowing it to speak and heal without destructive behavior. It also reconnects you to suppressed creative talents and emotional depth previously hidden within addictive coping. Once you've begun consciously addressing your shadow self, your relationship with addiction fundamentally changes. Rather than compulsively driven by unconscious forces, you consciously embrace your shadow's truths, integrating them into daily awareness and healthy expression. Jung was clear, your shadow isn't negative alone. It holds incredible power, creativity, resilience, and strength. Through integration, previously suppressed aspects become available to you. Creativity. Unleash artistic talents, emotional insight, intuition, and innovative thinking previously hidden. Resilience. Transform your shadow's past pain and trauma into sources of profound emotional strength and wisdom. Authenticity. Embrace your whole self, light and dark, and step confidently into authentic living without shame or fear. Empathy and connection. Your healed wounds deepen empathy and compassion towards yourself and others, creating healthier relationships. Jung called this journey towards wholeness individuation, the lifelong process of consciously integrating your shadow and becoming fully yourself. Healing addiction through shadow work isn't about perfection. It's about authenticity, honesty, and integration. It means acknowledging your wounds openly, living consciously, and embracing your humanity fully. You'll no longer be afraid of your shadow. It becomes your ally, guide, and powerful inner resource. When addiction no longer controls you, life becomes deeply meaningful. You experience freedom, not only from destructive behaviors, but freedom to consciously live your truth. Relationships heal and deepen without addictive patterns sabotaging intimacy. Purpose emerges clearly as you reconnect to your authentic emotional needs and desires. Emotional pain transforms into profound self-understanding, resilience, and wisdom. Life ceases being about numbing pain and becomes about embracing meaning, creativity, connection, and fulfillment. Carl Jung's powerful insight into the shadow self isn't theoretical. It's practical, transformative, and deeply healing. You have the tools, you have the courage, and now you clearly understand the path forward. Confront your shadow consciously. Embrace your emotional wounds openly. Heal your addiction through radical honesty, integration, and self-acceptance. Your shadow is no longer hidden. It's no longer destructive. It's your most powerful guide toward wholeness, authenticity, and true healing. And this powerful journey of transformation isn't something you must do alone. It begins right here, right now, through commitment, compassion, and conscious self-awareness. Your shadow awaits you, not to hurt, but to heal. It's finally time to come home to yourself. Subscribe to the Awakened Compass and join our membership to unlock the full journey within.